Is your company one of the 93% surveyed, indicating they are ineffective at forming strategy? Companies successful in forming strategy use a strategic decision process. Foresight Business Consulting is developing an online course that teaches a new strategic decision process. You can enroll as a founding member at a fabulous discount during Foresight's crowdfunding campaign. Visit the Lean Strategy Masters campaign page at bit.ly/Lean Strategy Masters or search for Lean Strategy Masters on Indiegogo.com.
Savvy Business Radio runs in syndication on 8 AM/FM stations nationwide, including iHeartRadio and 6 podcasting platforms. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or to become a guest and find out how we can help you get your message out in a bigger way, call 732-474-7375 or email Christina at savvybusinessradio.com.
Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. This is your host, Christina Nitschmann. Our guest today is Chris McNamara, founder of Tech Gear Lab and its sister company, Outdoor Gear Lab. Today, Chris shares with us some of his vast experience with climbing and base jumping and what some of these experiences taught him about business. Find out more about Chris's wonderful companies at OutdoorGearLab.com and his blog at chrismcnamara.com. Hi, Chris. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
You betcha. I'm so excited because you have a very successful business. You deal with founder of Tech Gear Lab and the sister company Outdoor Gear Lab, which is, I believe, for rock climbing and people who do that sort of thing. But you are also a rock climber. But before we go to all that, what kind of brought you to the world of climbing and then to starting your business?
Well, the climbing story goes to a climbing gym birthday party. I was 14 and a friend invited me along and just got totally hooked right away, and probably would have never done too much with it, except I then was at a outdoor ed club meeting in high school about 6 months later, and I got the business plan for a climbing gym, and I decided to take all my life savings from working at a snack shack at a little league field and being the umpire, and just gave it away. My parents were really questioning my logic, but it turns out not only was it a good investment, but the guy who started the climbing gym took me up El Cap. I had almost no experience, and I got kind of drafted to the big leagues and got to climb, one of the biggest, hardest walls in the world. And that just completely changed my life. And I pretty much dedicated my life to climbing for the next 10 years.
Wow. And see, for me, I've only done it recently for the very, very first time in a gym in Manhattan. There's a wall climb that you can climb. And of course, it was the baby one because I've never done it before. But it was much harder than I thought and used so much more of your body than I anticipated. I mean, a lot of it came from the lower part of me. And it was funny because the guy said, you're so scared to, put your hand above your arm to reach the next rock that you look like one of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, with my arms at my waist. He was like,
yeah.
You have to reach up and grab the rocks. But here's another thing for me that was great for, because I have a big fear of heights. So as I'm going up the rocks, I'm looking down going, and they say, don't look down, but I have to look down to see where I'm going to put my feet.
No, I mean, you're actually doing the right thing in the sense of keeping your arms low, because that's the hardest thing for early climbers is to use their feet more. And by kind of keeping your hands lower, you end up using your feet. So I would actually say you are maybe having better advice than the instructor there.
Wow.
So
and I was just doing that.
Stick with it.
And I was just scared.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to lift my arm because I felt like I was losing my center of my center and safety zone. Like I felt like if everything was close to me, I felt safer, which is not necessarily true. But no, it was very, very awesome experience. I could see that if I continue to do it, I can totally kick the bucket to my fear of heights and such. But what happened for you when you went to the business world? How did you start applying some of the greatest lessons you learned in climbing? How did that work out for you?
Well, the cool thing about climbing is it has this real frugal culture. And so early on, I saw all these people who had kind of decided to lead that maxim that at either end of the social spectrum is a leisure class. They were just on the leisure class of not working at all and just kind of living off dollars a day. And so instead of getting kind of a summer job, I took the opposite approach. Was I will just not spend any money and I'll just live in Yosemite and climb walls all the time. And so when I started a business, the first business I started was a climbing guidebook company. And I started it because I was having trouble in college. I didn't know if I was going to graduate, and I knew I wasn't really cut out for a real job. So I knew I was going to have to create my own job. So I started using that kind of frugal philosophy that I learned in Yosemite and applied it to business, where it was, the first rule is don't lose money. Whatever you do, whatever startup capital you need, just really figure out how to keep those expenses low and then slowly scale up the business from there.
Ooh, scale up, just like scaling up the mountain. Yeah.
See what I did there?
Yeah, I love that.
But I see so many startups who I think get this idea that everything should be in like the Silicon Valley model, where you first you go get a ton of someone else's money, and then you're going to have an idea that's so has such a huge margin that you can just start spending money right off the bat. And for most businesses and most small businesses, I think it's just the opposite. You start, as small as you can, you test ideas, and when they start getting traction, then you scale them up. So I highly recommend, whether you're a climber or not, to kind of get that, I call it the Yosemite MBA almost, where you first learn how to just, what are the expenses you really need? What is really essential? And it gives you a whole new perspective on how to, be frugal and start a business without going into debt.
I love that. When I first got started, I would look at other businesses. And I think this is a mistake that a lot of business owners make, is they will look at businesses at the end goal, where they've been in business for 20 years or 10 years, and they're now super successful. So they said, oh, okay, they do XYZ, so I'm going to do XYZ. I'm going to have a budget of thousands of dollars in marketing per month and XYZ and TV commercials or whatever it might be. And they're not thinking that that's not where they started 10 years ago or 20 years ago. They started in their garage, doing it all themselves, doing their own like flyers and passing it out to neighbors and such like that. And I think that's something I forgot. I went out and I went to look for radio promotional ads I could do on WNYC. I went to a newspaper around here and got them to print an ad for me, which did nothing as far as bringing me business and stuff like that. Instead of realizing there are wonderful ways to today's age, especially in the digital age, where there's a lot of accessible things that you can do for absolutely free. Podcasting, thousands or millions of podcasts out there, a lot of other ways from blogging and such to really promote your business without having to spend a lot of money. So, yeah. And was there anything else that you pulled out from your time at Yosemite, from living there and such, that were really good lessons?
I think the main one related to the business was there'd already been a bunch of guidebooks out there. So the question was, why start another guidebook company? And the principle was, there's an opportunity to really push the standard ahead, to create something that's totally world-class, ahead of what else is out there. And if I hadn't seen that, then I would have never started a guidebook company, because, unless I think, there's some saying that unless you have a product that's kind of 10x better than the next one, you shouldn't start it, just because, just being a little bit better than someone else who's already really entrenched and has a big, great customer base, it's just not going to work. And so I use that from the guidebook company to then start Outdoor Gear Lab and Tech Gear Lab. And then the idea there was take that model of world class and apply it to gear reviews. And we're not going to bother putting out a review that is just slightly better than someone else's, or we're not going to just focus everything on trying to come up with some algorithm that pulls data that will then, make a review. We're going to just go do the really hard journalistic work and try to create something that's so much better than everything else that people will love it, and they'll be our greatest marketers for us.
So explain exactly what Tech Gear Lab and Outdoor Gear Lab do. So they don't sell stuff so much as giving you an idea or reviews of where to go to get the best outdoor equipment and such?
Yeah, so the gear review world used to be kind of just split in two. One was kind of the Consumer Reports model, where they're super objective, but the only way they could make money was to charge a subscription. So you only get access to that information if you buy their subscription. And then on the other hand, you had these reviews from places like, say, CNET, where they do reviews of, varying quality, but at the same time, they're getting paid advertising dollars from all the products that they review. So there becomes this real kind of conflict where they can only be so objective, they can only be so critical, because if you say the wrong thing, your mortgage and your light bill aren't going to get paid. So we kind of found this middle ground where we buy all the product ourselves, like Consumer Reports does, but instead of a subscription model, we give away all the information for free, because our hope is that people will find it so useful that so many people will come to the site that a small percentage of them, when they buy through our site at, say, REI or Amazon, we then get a little percentage back. It's called the affiliate model. So the idea was basically this affiliate model, which typically has a bad name because it used to be just kind of used by coupon sites and things like that. But there's a way to use it for good, for being able to create the world's most objective reviews, where all we think about, we don't have any advertisers, we don't have to think about the companies whose products we're reviewing, we don't have to worry about their feelings. We just focus on the people who are buying a down jacket or buying a hoverboard. And we just think about that person and how do we create the world's best resource for them? How do we make sure that they spend their money on the perfect product for them, not the product that was, given to the review site for free and then someone wrote kind of a glowing review about.
Wow. I really love this concept because years ago, I first heard about affiliate marketing through a number of networking companies that were using affiliate marketing. And it was kind of a icky feel from the people I met when I first heard about it. I mean, they would try to invite me for coffee and sell me everything under the sun that I didn't need, and try to push me to also be a seller of it so that I could work under them, and hence have this kind of pyramid thing where the very top person of whatever that is they're selling makes out like a bandit, and everyone else gets bits of it until you get to the bottom where you're making very little. And to me, it just gave me a very icky feel, and I thought, I just don't like this affiliate thing. But lately, I have seen you and other folks use it in a way that has integrity and honesty and really helps people out there, not just pushing products, but really giving a product to someone in a way that is best serves the public.
Yeah, and that's, partially it's because we're excited to have a business that has that kind of belief at its core, but it's also just the actual business itself. Our kind of long-term success will be based on how much people really trust us and how much people say that, there's so many reviews out there, but these guys are doing everything they can just for me. They don't have any other interests. And so it's kind of both not only fun to be in that type of business from a kind of an integrity standpoint, but it's also the actual business model.
Yeah. And I think if other businesses listen in, this is a model, not only a model, but a way of being that all businesses can use to be successful, because really customers know when you're putting them first, and you can pretend to be, I'm a great at customer service. And an interesting fact, we had someone we were going to interview last year who claimed upside, backward, forwards that they were the king and queen of customer service. And when we interviewed their employees and such and their customers, it was the exact opposite. And I thought it was fascinating how a lot of companies, most of which will say, we have fabulous customer service, we put our customers first. And that's not often the case. I mean, yes, you got to make money so you can continue to hire people and grow and serve more clients, but it has to come from, as you say, really making the client first.
Yeah, and really just thinking about what out there isn't being done and how do you do it better. And that's in the world of reviews. We chose tech gear and outdoor gear, but there's a giant other world out there that we don't focus on.
Yeah.
But you look out there and you go, there's not a lot of really objective stuff. Is there an opportunity? And my belief is, I'm a little biased because I'm in this business, but I think fast forward 10 years and people will be joking like, oh yeah, I remember in 2017 when people bought products based on recommendations of, companies were also paying them on kind of on the other end of that. And like, no way, no one would ever come up with a review model like that. Of course, the only review model that you would do is one that's totally objective. But today that isn't the case. I happen to think it will be in 10 years, but today I think there's a real opportunity for a lot of people.
Absolutely. There certainly is. And what's interesting, I heard from someone recently, and also I read a book a couple of years ago, how important reviews are and pure reviews. I used to think that I really didn't buy based on reviews and what other people thought, but I find more and more when I pay attention to it, how many times have I thought to go buy something? I check Amazon, past customers, what are they saying about this product? And so we're getting more and more reviews and trusting people we don't even know, like not even neighbors or friends, but people who've tried the products who say, yeah, this is awesome and I'm willing to go with it. So what you're doing here is a very important service for people out there so they know they're getting the best possible product. And so, Chris, I want to go back to something else you said that I found fascinating. When you were living in Yosemite and you found a way to be super frugal because you weren't using money at all, did you discover in your life how much you were using prior to that you didn't need to be using in your life?
Well, in some sense, I was a broke college kid, so there wasn't a ton to cut back on. But what I did learn is that all my other friends were like, I'm working this summer job. I don't like it, but I need money to go party, or I need money to go do this, and that. And so it's just kind of taught it. And I think the reason they were doing those is because kind of everyone else around them was. And so there was this kind of, I wouldn't say like herd mentality, but, I'm just doing what everyone else does, which is a normal summer, which is you work a job that you don't totally like. It teaches you a little about hard work, and then you spend the money on parties or whatever. And that's just, the way it goes. And so it was cool for me just to see kind of a different approach to that. That there were a whole bunch of different ways to do things. You didn't just have to kind of follow the common knowledge of what you do on your summer vacation. And then I kind of took that when I started the business, which was, the typical business, you're supposed to go get an office. And I said, well, if I don't get an office, and if my parents are nice and they were to let me store all the books in their garage, suddenly my overhead is almost zero. I just really have a cell phone and internet bill. And if I do that, I'll just, even if things get tight, if there's a recession, I'll always be able to kind of fall back on that. So that is one thing about Silicon Valley, which I think is kind of a cool metaphor, which is, most great companies start in a garage, even though they don't today. But just that whole idea that when you start a company, the first thing you do isn't necessarily go get an office and go get business cards and go get a bunch of marketing. The first thing you do is focus everything on the product and run things as lean as you possibly can.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. I remember back in sociology class, my professor said something that intrigued me. This was in 1998, actually. He said to me, today, cell phones are becoming so prevalent, and this is before like everyone had them, but quite a few people had them. And he said, now it's gotten to the point where all poor people feel that it's absolutely mandatory for me to have a television and a cell phone. When in actuality, of course, there was a time when we had neither and we lived just fine without either of them. And I thought that was interesting, that perspective, because I think, and this is what I realized when I left corporate and started working my own business, is that there were a lot of things I had in my life that were not necessary, from, maybe a fancy cup of coffee to cable TV to fancy cell phone service. Did I need $116 of cell phone service, or could I get the pay-as-you-go model and just use what I absolutely need per month for business? And so I like what you're telling me there, and what you've learned, and what we're passing on to our listeners is that in life and in business, there's ways that you could be just as happy and just as successful without sometimes having to use as much.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one thing that even today I still have to check in all the time, go through that credit card bill and be like, what is really necessary here? Do we need these subscription services? Those are the ones that kind of often get you, or how could we think about how to do this smarter? So.
Yeah. Well, I was very intrigued also when Laura told me that you built your own wingsuit. Let me tell you, Ombre, I've taken flight lessons and I love to fly. I'm scared of it, but I love to fly. And I've always wanted to be an actual bird that didn't have to have an airplane around me to fly, but could actually be free as a bird and fly. And so when I saw a wingsuit base jumping, I was like, oh my gosh, I want one. Of course, you can't just jump into a wingsuit and jump out of a plane or off a cliff because you'll kill yourself. There's a way to work up to it. But going through that experience of building your own wingsuit and then jumping and then base jumping with a wingsuit, was there any lessons you learned from doing that you also applied to your business?
Well, I mean, so getting into wingsuit base jumping was coolest thing I've ever done. Also the most dangerous, which is why I quit it 7 years ago. But I think the biggest lesson there was it was an amazing time because I got to be at the very kind of beginning of when wingsuits were commercially available. People have been making them for 100 years, but usually they ended up in someone just spiraling to the ground and dying.
Wow.
About around 2003, 2001, 2003, somewhere in there, you could actually buy a wingsuit that was relatively safe, emphasis on relatively. And what it meant is suddenly there were all these cliffs in the world that had been jumped off without a wingsuit, which meant you had to open your parachute generally right away.
Yeah.
And now with a wingsuit, you could get these incredibly long flights. Now people are flying for over 2 minutes, sometimes over 3 minutes. So it was cool because as a Yosemite climber who really loved the history, there was a golden age in Yosemite in the 60s and 70s where everything happened at a really fast rate. And it was, just the coolest time to be there because there was so much progression happening. And there's still cool things happening today, but they will never be at that same rate, which is why that is known as the golden age. And I realized that I was stepping into the golden age of wingsuiting where the progression was happening so fast. There were so many things that had never been done that you got to stand on top of these cliffs and be the first person to jump off it. So, the business analogy there, it's a little bit of a stretch, but it was just that same passion for trying to find something new, a new idea, and see a technology, the wingsuit, and then see the opportunity, which was no one had ever looked at these cliffs thinking you could fly off them because we hadn't had the technology until right now, on that day. But I ended up quitting because more and more of my friends were dying, like a lot of them. And it was becoming less and less fun. And so it was really those two things intersecting and realizing that that was a very stark example because it was becoming less fun and people were dying. So in some sense, it was a no-brainer. Like, why would you do something that's less fun that's, could end the next 60 years of really cool opportunities for me, or 70 or however long we're all going to end up living. But in other pursuits, I now kind of think about it, not that I want to jump between activity to activity or business to business, but I do look at things now from a different lens, which is as incredible as something can be, if it's no longer really helping you grow, I think it's good to constantly reevaluate it. And so with, my current business, I'm kind of always thinking about how can this job not only keep me growing, how can it be dynamic and constantly change, but how can it really give the most to the employees so that they think that this is a really amazing place to work and really want to be proud of creating their best work. So it's kind of a bit of a stretch of an analogy, but that is kind of what I took away from that whole experience of learning how to fly off cliffs and then realizing I needed to stop once the progression had ended.
Yeah. And it's amazing about flying because people even say to me when I was studying flying that it's so, so dangerous. And it doesn't have to be. I mean, I'd say a wingsuit is a lot more dangerous because you don't have an operating machine around you to help you out. It's you've got your body. And if anything goes wrong, the wind goes off. I saw people flying a little too close to mountains and such, and you've got very little room for error. If wind kicks up or a little bit, bam, you're going straight into that mountain. So, and the same thing happens in an airplane. You just have to understand flying in mountains and understand to have respect for nature and the wind and everything like that. But what I would gather from all of that I heard from you is that you've probably also learned a good deal of respect for knowing how far to push the envelope. That yes, you probably push the envelope a little more than most entrepreneurs or most people, but at the same time you have respect to know that, okay, here's when I need to back off.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And it's actually funny you mentioned the flying analogy, because the latest thought, because this year in wingsuit base jumping, I think more people died than ever have, maybe 30 or 40, which we're talking about a pretty small group of people, in the low thousands. So to have 40 people die in one summer is pretty staggering. Yes. And the thought is that it's because they don't realize that they are airplanes in a sense, and that they are pilots piloting their own airplane, I guess, that to do it safely, you really need to go to pilot school.
Yes.
You really need to understand, and I haven't been to flight school, so you're the one who would be able to comment on this better, but you need to understand so much about the dynamics of what's happening and the weather and all these things that in base jumping we're kind of all a bunch of often it's almost Stone Age technology where you pick up a rock, drop it off a cliff, it doesn't hit it for a while, and then you go, yeah, okay, it's good, and then you jump off. God. Which was, literally the state of the art when I was doing it. And now there's more and more people saying, yeah, that's great and all if you want to live another, 24 months, but if you want to make this a lifetime thing and have a family, you really need to go to flight school. You really need to understand everything that a pilot needs to understand, if not more, because in a sense, you're a test pilot, you're the most dangerous type of pilot. So.
Ooh, and that's a good analogy too, because every single airplane or machine I've been into operates slightly different. Of course, there's the same capacities outside, the same stuff going on with weather and stuff and wind and all of that, but every machine is slightly different because it moves through the air differently. But every body, because you're an actual machine yourself when you're doing it, is going to operate different at different times. And also we've had physiology talks that based on how you're feeling, what's going on in physiology with you, it'll affect how you fly. So all of that plays in, and people are kind of scared sometimes of flying, but actually it's completely safe if you have the proper training. And in fact, it's one of the safest modes of transportation if you have a very trained pilot up there in front. So yeah, totally. But this has been such a fascinating talk. I love chatting with you today, Chris.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, well, I don't want us to leave without you letting the audience know where they can find out more about you and your business and get a hold of you so they can check out reviews for themselves before they go to Yosemite or any other park or any other tech gear. Oh, how can they do that?
Well, the climbing guidebooks we actually still have going, and those are at supertopo.com. And then the two review companies are Outdoor Gear Lab and Tech Gear Lab. So yeah, be excited for folks to check it out. Let me know what they think. We have a little comment form at the bottom, and I actually read them all. So that would be cool.
Great. And before we end out, if anyone here is getting excited hearing about some of your past experiences with base jumping and climbing, what would be your top tip for anyone who's maybe thinking, I want to try this?
I think the best thing is just to go to a gym. That's the easiest. And you get instantly, like you just did, that sense of the heights. And then if it grabs you, just get outdoors and try it. Yeah. And the base jumping, I cannot recommend. But if you do want to do it, you should read The Great Book of Base, because it really does take everything about the sport, puts it in. I helped the author publish it and or distribute it. And it's an amazing resource, and it does go into all those flight dynamics. So even if you don't want to base jump, if you just want to understand how a body becomes an airplane, that's the resource to check out.
Yes. And there are, I would also say, just as an in-between thing, for gliding, I've had a lot of pilots. We've had one pilot return guest a number of times. She flies A330. She's coming back again. But she often said even commercial pilots, they will lose their skills sometimes because they'll be relying on the technology, which a lot of it has autopilot and such. And you just, I've heard pilots say, I get off the ground 100, 200 feet and I turn on the autopilot. It's like, dude, what happens when the autopilot fails? Okay. But she recommends that anyone interested in flying really go out there and get good stick and rudder skills and really learn the operations of moving through the air in a machine with glider flying. And it's the closest way probably to being a base wingsuit jumper, because you're practically right out there and you're really feeling the effects of thermals and wind and all that good jazz, and really getting a handle of what aeronautics is all about. So yeah, totally.
I want to go do that now.
Yeah, you've got to go do that. So Chris, I want to thank you again for coming. This has been a fabulous talk, and I want to thank you for sharing your great wisdom today on Savvy Business Radio.
Thank you.
Is your company one of the 93% surveyed, indicating they are ineffective at forming strategy? Companies successful in forming strategy use a strategic decision process. Foresight Business Consulting is developing an online course that teaches a new strategic decision process. You can enroll as a founding member at a fabulous discount during Foresight's crowdfunding campaign. Visit the Lean Strategy Masters campaign page at bit.ly/Lean Strategy Masters or search for Lean Strategy Masters on Indiegogo.com. After 5 years of creating exciting business content with amazing businesses from around the world, Savvy is now creating a new video series entitled Heartbeat of the World. This series will feature experts from around the globe. We will highlight and discuss some of the greatest challenges facing the U.S. and the world. Co-create with us and find out more at bit.ly/SavvyPatron.